Hello and good evening, everyone. Welcome to Take Five. This is a weekly show hosted by Strawdog Theater Company, where we bring artists from across the planet to have a conversation about live theater and digital storytelling with a spirit of gratitude and innovation. My name is Michael Reyes. I will be your host tonight. I am an ensemble member with Strawdog. I'm also on the board of directors. Side note, if you've ever wanted to join volunteer leadership of a small but mighty storied staple of the amazing Chicago theater community, send me an email at michael.reyes@strawdog.org and we can chat more. Back to program. I've been a part of this community for almost as long as Strawdog has been around, and I can't imagine myself playing my craft anywhere else. Beyond that, like most actors, I have a second life doing corporate work in the realm of project management, including in the areas of sustainability and corporate volunteerism. Um, if you are watching this on YouTube, you can head over to strawdog.org/thankyou5 to join the chat and ask questions, but also, and significantly, to vote on questions so that we know what questions are burning in the pit of your soul that can only be answered by the group we've assembled here tonight. And speaking of that group, I would like to start with some introductions, starting with Tlaloc.
Hello, my name is Tlaloc Lopez Waterman. I'm a lighting designer and projections designer and erstwhile sometimes scenic designer. And I am pretty commonly working in opera or musical theater, sometimes straight plays. And I've been working at this I was thinking about this today, I think more than 25 years, which is kind of insane because I'm working with people that are much younger than that this summer. And so I'm working this summer at Brevard Music Center, and we are doing La Traviata, Turn of the Screw, Into the Woods, and a Gershwin review. So we are definitely going to be busy this summer, and I'm happy to be here at Thank You Five.
Awesome. Thank you. Stephanie.
Hi, I am Stephanie Douglas. I am a storyteller, writer, performer, actor, improviser, occasional director. I also have a day job where I work with historically disenfranchised communities. We run a high school for kids who have dropped out or been pushed out of Chicago public schools, and then workforce development in woodworking and shipping trades for adults with barriers to employment. And the next piece that I'm working on is actually part of the National Women's Theater Festival and Raleigh Fringe. And I've developed a solo show called Live, Nude, Complicated Grief, which is the most fun you will have, really coming to grips with the fact that everyone you love is going to die. So I'm looking forward to it. It's June 24th and 29th. And then in general, I host the Moth in Chicago. I'm one of the hosts there. So that is also super fun. And I am thrilled to be here.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Looking forward to that. Craig.
Hi, I'm Craig Esther. I'm an actor, a director, and a writer from Detroit, Michigan. I'm currently the artistic director, one of the founders of Break the Chain Theater Company out here. I just got finished directing, but you can still see it, The Comedy of Errors at the Hoosier Shakespeare Festival. We are running until June 27th. 27th, yes. So you can check their site for information on dates for that show. And then I'm about to start directing a production of Love Labor's Lost here in Detroit, Michigan at Shakespeare Royal.
Awesome. Johanna.
Hi, I'm Johanna Maynard Edwards. I am the Executive Artistic Director of the National Women's Theater Festival. We are colonially based. We're based in the land colonially known as Raleigh, North Carolina, but also known as the Tuscarora Nation. And the 8th annual National Women's Theater Festival opens next week and runs the 21st through the 21st of June through the 1st of July. And we're not just a come to Raleigh type festival. We are also a hybrid, fully digital, virtual streaming festival, include everything from our conference programming to our Fringe Festival.
Fantastic. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for all of that. let's start our conversation tonight, and this is a conversation. So let's start our conversation with, the very simple, easy to be answered question: what is theater? Johanna, you were just up. Let's start with.
Yes, I'm shocked that I came up first on this because I thought I held out so that I would not have to say this first. I used to have like really finicky opinions about this, but like most folks, after what we've been through making theater these last several years, that my definition and my vision for what theater is has really changed. Our company was we we were in the first week of March 2020, we went digital, and that's kind of how we became the National Women's Theater Festival, was by just everyone being at home and wanting to do these digital events with us. So to me, theater stopped being about being in person. It stopped being about being in a room and really got really down to the stories we share and how we're sharing them became to me what theater really is.
That is so interesting. I know we have a panel to talk about, but if I could just share a personal reaction to that. My definition of theater and what is theater sound like: it must be live. I must be literally within spitting distance of you. But there is an inevitability about the digital components, I would say, that feels, it felt very wrong, let's say at the beginning of the pandemic, and now just feels a little bit part of who and what we are. So that's interesting. I'm glad to hear your perspective about, story.
Yeah, I feel like you too, and I'm sure lots of folks on this panel have felt that way. But what we found in just those very first weeks, that same synergy of being in a room with people, we were capturing it, and that feeling of not aloneness was happening through Zoom and through OBS and across to friends out on Twitch. And we left those nights feeling so fulfilled and so nourished and so not alone. And it was through story. It was through our buddy Caradad Fitch saying, yeah, let's try to make my play digital. Yeah, why not?
That's amazing. It seems a little counter to what maybe we all sort of thought at the beginning, right? That you can't form a connection, but it seems odd to say in the environment that we're in right now, but you can't form a connection, digitally. I guess film has been doing that forever, but somehow you can't do that from a theatrical perspective. So that's interesting to me. I'm glad to hear that as well. So, and that's been your experience. It's been pervasive, and you have pivoted to that.
Yeah, we
Sounds like.
pivoted fast and furiously, and it paid off. Like I said, I mean, we were able to become not just the Women's Theater Festival of North Carolina, we became the National Women's Theater Festival. And from 2019 to 2020, we tripled our revenue.
That's amazing, and congratulations on that. That's
We
amazing. Yeah.
exploded our attendance.
Wow. That's I'm experiencing an internal paradigm shift. So thank you for that. We'll come back to all of this, by the way. This is, we're just sort of like getting some stuff out, for the moment, but let's continue to tie these threads together, I would say. Stephanie?
Yeah, I mean, I think similarly, for me, it was always like it involves some form of bodies and figures telling some sort of story in some sort of space. And I think very much that has broadened to, to include the digital world. I still, I think it's two very different parts of my brain. I think as a performer and as a host, I even think about, when we do the Moth in a room versus when we were doing it online throughout the pandemic, and what that felt like, and being able to gauge the audience's reaction. And I think something really interesting for me, just in terms of, because of the theater I do, is very much like often does not involve a fourth wall for a significant part of things. Noticing that digitally, the audience has to choose to show you their reaction sometimes if it's not facial, right? And so I think that it's, I don't have fully developed thoughts on that, but it's something that I notice where you can gauge your people where you're in a room with them. If you have a performance that is partially improvised, as the ones I'm about to do are, you can kind of turn on a dime. You can have things that you're going to switch versus, folks who may choose to be in a digital audience off camera and they are showing you what they feel with emojis, or and they're really having to actively choose that. I'll also say, just a shout out to an artist who I think really brought a great perspective to theater during the pandemic is Joshua William Gelb, who is just a fantastic performer and director. He's out of New York City, and he did something called Theater in Quarantine, where he literally turned a closet in his apartment into this box and just proceeded to make different kinds of digital theater and just theater in this literal little box in his apartment, with all of these different theater makers from New York and many other places. And it was a really like interesting take on it, and I feel like was very exciting. And I'm like, oh, there's a lot more there, as much as I missed being in rooms with humans or animals.
Animals, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, is it? I feel like I want to explore that quite a bit more.
I just wanted to include annoyance productions and other,
Oh.
others that involved, bringing animals onto a stage and.
That aren't puppets.
Yes, also
Okay.
puppets. Though I do miss being in a room with puppets.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we could have a whole entire panel discussion about puppets and puppetry.
Well, yeah, you guys need to get Chad the bird on here.
Craig.
Yeah, sure. So for me, I just think theater is a gathering of people to either hear or tell a story. I think just at its basic core, it's that. Obviously, as we've talked about so far, that has changed a lot in the last few years. So for me, I started my company with my co-founders in 2021 because we were seeing a lot of theaters in Detroit sort of starting to die and sort of peel away. And so we started digital, and now in the last year or so, we've slowly moved ourselves into trying to convert that digital audience to an in-person audience, and that's been to varying degrees of success. We put on a full production this year of an adaptation of Romeo and Juliet that we did, and that was the first time we really got to see oh, these are the people that have been maybe paying attention to us. In our digital, we did a digital drunk Shakespeare series, a digital new play festival, and a few other things like that. And all of it was just about how do we take an audience who's used to Twitch, used to YouTube, used to all these other broadcasting capacities, and can we take those people and turn them into theater goers? And it's been an interesting experiment. I will say that it's sometimes sort of scattershot because you're taking someone who's used to seeing you on a screen like this and going, no, you can come to this building now, and we're in the building, and we'll be with you, and you can see us, and all of that. And yeah, it's just interesting which audiences do that, because then you're also dealing with the fact that if older audience members are very much like, we're going to plan this, and we're showing up at this day on this specific time, and younger people will go I heard the podcast that you made 7 months ago, and then I just saw that you were in town, so I'm just going to walk up. And it's great that happens, but at the same time, the idea of creating the consistent theater goer that will do things like buy a season subscription and help you to have a little bit more in the till before you start the show. It's just a balance. So that definition of just gathering somewhere to hear a story has been helpful to us, but now we're trying to figure out what's the relationship between where you're gathering and what you're choosing to do in those spaces, and how do you combine those audiences.
That's so interesting to me. I don't know how the others feel here, but do you what's your audience feedback been like? I mean, are they I'm having a flashback to my dad making us dress up every time we got on a flight, because it was it was an important thing, it was a very cool thing. And then I think about the last time I was on a flight where I was like, which sweatpants am I going to wear? Which awful t-shirt am I going to wear? Because, I need to be comfortable, so do you have any sort of anecdotal, Are your audiences dressing up? Are they wearing ties?
Well, it's interesting because what we got this past show that we did was set in a church. So the Romeo and Juliet was like a group of kids doing Romeo and Juliet for their church was the premise of the production. And so we got a lot of church people. So yes, you did have some people who were like that come to the matinee from a service. And then we also had a lot of, because in Michigan, in Detroit, this area, we do have several theater schools around and the colleges. You had then you're like 20 somethings who are in like ripped jeans and t-shirts, and then you had your older people in your church outfits, and we were talking about sort of like the non-binary connection to Shakespeare, young people's connection to Shakespeare, and so it brought these different kinds of people into a room together who would not normally be in a room reacting. And so when you watch the show, it was interesting to see the things that like, okay, here's the church crowd, and they're very much reacting to like this very specific bit about how to behave in a congregation. But then we talk about like non-binary issues and trying to figure out your pronouns and your name and all that kind of stuff. And that group of people is like, what's going on here? And then another side of the audience is just filled with smiles. And so it was interesting to make those audiences talk to each other, which was our ultimate goal, which is usually our goal, is how do we get these groups of people to talk to each other.
Yeah, community.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. I love that. Again, we're going to thread some of this stuff together. Talalo.
So for me, I looked at it in a kind of a technical way, because I did some digital theater about a couple months into the pandemic, and at a university called Salisbury University, and we did the show Everybody. I don't know if you guys know that show. And that's a hard show to do online. and and what I started to discover is that there's two big things that are really, really useful to actually have a theater happen. And one is low latency. And there's a physical problem about low latency on this medium, right? Because we're not next to each other. And so there's an additional amount of latency that happens in that medium. So I felt that the next thing is rehearsal. I think theater might be rehearsal, because when people rehearsed only on Zoom, they started to live and breathe that particular latency. And then all of a sudden there was this magic that came forward that it didn't feel like there was any latency, because they were used to it. They never, second show, it wasn't Everybody, this other show that we did, they never rehearsed in the same room. They always rehearsed on Zoom. And even in tech rehearsals, I remember I was working on getting, craziness to happen to work, but I was hearing them on their breaks joking with each other and getting that timing down in what was not their lines. They weren't running their lines. They were just joking. They were just throwing jokes back to each other, back and forth. And I realized that what I was witnessing was the dissection of the components that are really necessary for us to have this powerful thing that is theater. Film, what you do is you build something to hold, you build something to keep, and then you go work on it in post, and you kind of make those things line up. What you have to do in theater is you have to rehearse with all the components, with the performers, the director, the eventually the technicians, and then the designers, and then you roll it down the hill, and you let it see. All of it has to sort of happen as a result of all of that rehearsal. And so I think for me, theater is rehearsal, rather than theater is being in the same room, or rather than theater is, getting spit on, or rather than theater is any of that. I think it also is all of that. But I think that when a bunch of people get together and try to make something brand new in the lowest latency that they possibly can with the physical restraints that they have, what results is theater. And it should be a really powerful word when you hear it, because it's a happening. I asked this question, I think last week, and people were like, what is he talking about? But it's a happening. It's a thing that happens because you put all this energy and effort and intention into a thing, and you work towards it and work towards it and work towards it. And then all of a sudden you see something you never saw before.
That's I'm loving hearing what you're saying about this. I don't know, maybe sometimes as an actor I get a little, too much into my own like little sphere of things. I didn't, I was always like at the beginning of the pandemic, oh, we can't do theater on Zoom, that's film, and like we're not film, so it's interesting for me, and I'm sure others have already come to this conclusion long before, all of this, but to like, hear like how the execution of theater in a digital way is still theater, even though you're, not, as we are in Chicago in Black Box Theater within, a reachable distance to one another. I love that. When I was in college 9,000 years ago, one of my professors, my theater history professors, wrote this long paper about how video games were going to kill theater. Like the rise of video games meant that theater was theater was dead. And of course, it didn't happen. It's just, theater or video games, I feel like evolved into theater because they're all, at least the really good ones are about story, right? So that's kind of one of the couple, one of the things that I pulled out of this conversation, and I'd like to hear if you guys too have heard some common things, but story seems to be a common thread through this, connection maybe, community, and not so much interaction. What's I kept saying threads. Like what have you picked up in hearing your fellow panelists speak? Just shout it out. Stephanie, you're off mute.
I
So
think
you go ahead.
something Strawdog said just sat with me a lot in talking about the theater as rehearsal. It's the idea, right? No matter what we're doing, it's that we're giving a shit about how somebody receives a story, right? It's not just that we're there telling a story because you don't need an audience to tell a story, but we're actually caring and being intentional about how others are going to receive it. And so that there really is something in that, right? Even if the rehearsal is in your head, even if it's, improvisational and you are just rehearsing to get that, group mind together with your team, that in some way you are caring about how somebody is receiving the stories you're going to tell.
Yeah, the third crucial component. Johanna.
Yeah, piggybacking off of what my dearest Stephanie said, some threads around that everyone was speaking of around process and around the intention behind getting to the product of the piece or the moment or the happening. And I think that's one of the greatest gifts and revelations of all of the pandemic theater zone, is that we had to really slow down and really think with intention on how we're going to do things going forward.
I love that you called it a gift. That's
it's absolutely
that's
a gift, and it's a gift for so many reasons. It's a gift because this particular industry that we find ourselves in is hard, and we were given the opportunity to realize what it was like to have enough time off. And go ahead, sorry, Craig.
I just wanted to add also that the other side of having this new world of giving theater to people differently was, I think that for the first time in a very long time, theater was starting to become democratized in a way that it hasn't been before. And I was just thinking this watching the Tonys the other day with my family, with the idea that there were performance clips for all of the acting nominees, which means that all of these shows are recorded and none of us will ever see those recordings. unless someone decides to put them out there. So this moment that's supposed to be this big theater's coming out party to the world, and we're celebrating what happened in theater, not only is it the voice of a few blocks in New York, but that voice is going to then bleed into and become our national theater voice, and none of us will see these productions because that space is held, right? That stuff is put behind a wall. Sometimes it's a paywall, right? And sometimes it's just, they just lock up the recording. And one of the reasons I think we are struggling now to deal with having theater distributed electronically or having, Zoom shows and things like that is because people are only used to the one way of seeing theater, when the New York Public Library has a giant backlog of theater that everyone could have access to if someone would just press 2 buttons. I'm sure it's more than 2 buttons, but just saying, if our art form was more democratized in that way, it wouldn't feel so crazy to make the shift that we had to make in this last few years, and more people would be interested in the art form.
Is it?
Craig, I love that framework of democratized. The word I use for it is accessible.
Yeah.
That we can be more accessible, but we choose not to.
All right, I'm gonna say something that may be unpopular on the panel today. It takes money to make theater. Is there something wrong with having all? It's a library, the New York Library. That's one thing, but if I'm a theater owner, or if I'm a theater producer and I've got a thing that I've spent some money on, bringing to life, I want to be able to do more of that. I want to, perhaps I don't want to get rich off of it or whatever, but I do want to be able to do more of that. So I don't think we're saying that that's not a thing.
I will say that it needs to be rethought. The thing about it is that a lot of times, for example, in opera, we cannot show, even though the company would love to, and the singers would love to, it is impossible to show any of the archive video because of the way in which unions felt that they needed to protect themselves. And I'm not pushing against that. Like, unions should protect their members, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think I wish for a rethinking of that. I wish for a rethinking of how, in fact, bringing a recorded medium to the world would be better for the members of the union. Because then they can showcase their work. They can get other jobs. They can push forward in their particular path. And I can too. As a designer, I can say, watch this. This was my work. I mean, the fact that lighting designers are hired on pictures is ridiculous.
Oh, and there's not even and I guess because I understand the making money component, because running a theater company, you start to figure out, oh yeah, who's paying for this? Once you figure that out, you do see that money's an issue, but it's the fact that we don't even have a means to pay for it, right? There's no I don't know how many of us would just say, if there was a subscription to a National Theater Archive, and you could pay some amount of money per month to have access to those things, then that money goes out. Again, I don't know the math of who needs to be paid what, when, and then what the union balancing of that is. But even something small like that makes it that much more. I mean, that's one of the reasons that in London we see so much of their theater, because National Theatre Live just goes and puts all these different productions online, and we just get to see them. And I know that's subsidized a different way, but that's always my conundrum with all of it, is how do we show more people theater in a way that then makes it accessible for someone who maybe doesn't know that that's an option for their life, either see it or be a part of it. How do we show them that that's an option for them?
I mean, theaters do have had free days in the past. It's could we just hey, it's the third Tuesday of the month, we're just gonna show the thing, or it's all gonna be open.
I can speak with some data.
Oh, awesome.
So we started experimenting with pay what you can models and living ticket models in 2019, before the pandemic, and have continued that through. to now, like for this festival that's coming up next week, you can go online and you can pay $325 for an all access pass, or you can pay $1 for the pay what you can all access pass. And there's a lot of tiers in between. So from pre-pandemic through the pandemic to now, the statistics have not changed for our theater company. A good 60% of patrons will pay the general admission, 20% are going to pay below, and 20%, given the opportunity, pay above. When you put pay what you can on there, 20% are going to pay more because they can and because they value what you're doing. That's my data.
Yeah, bringing my day job into this conversation, like, people are always like, if you got the data to back it up, and I love that you just brought that up. I mean, I feel like, perhaps in this circle we're cool, but like, telling the rest of the world that it's just data and theater, that's so weird. But like, here you go, you just made,
Well, if you want a board of directors to like go with your wacky ideas that you want to just let people name their own price, you have to you got to prove the concept.
Right, communication and speaking, like everybody's speaking the same kind of language and speaking their language, and awesome. What other thoughts? We've got some questions that I would love to try and like work in here that we have come from the audience, but like any other thoughts that you have that you're like, oh wait, before we move on to the next thing, let's talk about let's have this. Anything else you want to say on what is on the broad topic of what is theater and what we talked about?
I mean, I do want to just also hit in the more specific accessibility standpoint, just thinking about, folks who, for a variety of reasons, it is not feasible or safe for them to be in the physical space of the theater. And so I think that's been a really huge thing, because I think there's the like financially accessible, and then there is just the like physically accessible and what is doable, or what what feels safe and what feels okay. And so I think that that's just something I know National Women's Theater Festival has thought a lot about, and I feel even as a writer and performer, just like thinking about the ways that I can do that more, and that the organizations that I work with can do that more. And I also just want to give a shout out to eventually getting our government to subsidize theater, because we pay people, not to grow corn and soy. My other life is also in agriculture. And I will say, like, I think we could, if we start subsidizing that theater, we have a little less to worry about in terms of like those free spaces and abilities to create that, because it's saying that the country places an importance on that, and that we are putting money behind that too.
And we've also learned, again, preaching to the choir, that what we do is necessary. It's not, it's necessary.
Everybody was depressed when they were like, oh God, I'm not going to see my favorite show. I'm not going to be able to go to this. Like, everybody was sad about it.
Yeah. And like, I've thought, like, I mean, we've been doing this since we could write on cave walls. I mean, how, anyway.
But I think what we've learned is that if we're going to do a show with 99 seats, we are actually keeping many thousands of people out of a space. We were including those 99 people. That's good. There's nothing wrong with that. But how can we break those walls open a little bit? And I think that what Johanna's doing is exactly that.
Yeah. It's I just said we were about to move on, but one last thing. I mean, it's giving, it's generosity, it's it's right. I mean, I don't know how you feel about that. It just feels like it's giving to get more. If I'm giving of my art, if I'm giving of my my craft, if I'm giving of whatever it is that my company has to offer. I mean, it's going to come back to us. I mean, it's a very scary concept in a capitalist society, I feel like, to like, we just can't give it away. We can't do that,
It's a slippery slope, Michael. It's a slippery slope.
I would also say though, because there's giving it away where you're just like, not getting anything in return. And sure, yes, we want to do some degree of that to make it accessible for people. But even just on the like selfish business person side or just the business person side, if more people can see your thing, then more people will show. I mean, I don't understand why we can't connect the fact that Beyonce has sold millions and millions and millions of tickets
Taylor
and
Swift.
has music videos where you can see her music, but people are still paying to go see Beyonce. And I don't know why there's not like, I mean, the closest equivalent we have in the theater right now for America is what, Hamilton? Because you can watch Hamilton right now for $6 on Disney Plus.
Mhm.
And then if Hamilton tours through your town, I don't know where
You're
there's not
gonna
that
go.
equivalent to like to an artist. It's like, oh, that's Hamilton, but it's actually live and in person, and I can be there and I can sweat with them and I can sing with them and all of that. Right. I just wonder how, and this is a very like far future conversation, how do we make the infrastructure to make that possible for more shows so that we can have both of those things working in tandem. So you can be watching, I don't know, like A Few Good Men on whatever streaming service to play. And then, oh, my local theater is actually doing A Few Good Men. I'd love to actually see that in person. How do we make that connection so that this definition of what theater is expands to just the exclusive thing that the 100 people that can afford to be in the building get?
Mhm.
I think that's such a great question and such a great like thing, Craig, to be thinking about. And one of the ways I think that that is working in some way, even though it's not this digital way that we're talking about, is the National New Play Network rolling world premieres, where the play gets this world premiere in 7 different venues across the country. And
Mhm.
it like really changes the life of that play that may or may not be Broadway or off Broadway, but suddenly just like explodes in our regional theater consciousness. And I think that's one way, but you're right. We have to be tackling this from a lot of ways.
But I will point out about the Hamilton Disney Plus show is that they filmed it like it's theater, not like it's a film. They showed what the eyeball sees, and it's beautifully done. I mean, I get chills talking about it. I wish that more people that that captured the theatrical process on film would know how to do that, so that you can experience it in that way, because that is what that thing is. It's a piece of theater.
So I feel like that's a awesome segue into our next question that happens to be teed up here. So I'm going to do that segue right now. This has been such a great conversation. I could talk to you guys for another 6 hours on it. But um, what's been posed to us is how can digital technology be used to transition an audience into and out of a show? I'm not specifically sure what the person who posed the question was saying, but like it's cool to just get your reactions. And Faluk, I think you are first up with some thoughts.
Yeah. So when I first read the question, I thought, well, we could talk about projection design. We can talk about live feeds in projection design, and sort of breaking some of the physical constraints of scenography. But then I realized, after you just asked the question in the way that you did, that it's also about, um, I mean, there's some crazy technology that's coming down the pike. I mean, we've got this Vision Pro or whatever it is from Apple. We've got other things like that, right?
Yeah.
So, but a thing that isn't often talked about is when you start to have that high quality of vision, what you stop doing is cutting between cameras. You keep the experience in the human, watching what they want to watch.
Hmm.
And so I think there's something to be said for that, about how we combine the camera, if you will, with the experience in the theater. Because if if we can have super high quality work like that, we don't have to have a zoom in to the right up to the person and cut and do the film thing. We can just give the eyeball the ability to look where they want to look, and look where the design and where the actors bring them to look. And I think that's something that I haven't heard talked about in a lot of places, but as we like, I've done a little bit of work with live concerts online, and we had some really high quality um, cameras, and we realized, and they were watching them in big theater, in big movie theaters, like in live, in a live sort of round trip. The artist could talk to the audience members and back and forth. We didn't want cuts. We just wanted that large vision. So it's not something I ever expected to say, because I love the way that, you know, video editing works, but we may be moving towards a better quality situation where there's less of that and more allowing the eyeball of the audience to do the work.
Yeah, yeah, room for all of it. Johanna?
Yeah, my answer is not that technically specific. It's around getting the human touches that you would get in a venue-based performance between an audience and the ticket takers and the box office and the concessions. So some examples from our production in 2021, we partnered with Play on Shakespeare to do an all-Black femme production, digital production of Othello. And so this was a really, really much about anti-Black, anti-queer, anti-woman specific type of racism with Othello. And so part of what we did is we had our dramaturg and cultural consultant create these digital care packages for audience members. And there was a few different ones to open depending on your identity. So that it had like some preparatory materials about the production. So you were everyone was offered everything, but it was like, if you're a white person coming to this show, here's a care package specifically for you with some questions and prompts, as specific care practices for Black audiences and then non-Black people of color. And then we open the YouTube space really early, and we intentionally have a staff member whose job is to be the chat moderator and to encourage or really intentional engagement through the chat. And then at intermission, we have these breakout spaces, Zooms that you can go to, or these other recordings where you could do some breath work or commune with folks. And then afterwards, again, we would have like a breakout Zoom where folks could join in a talk back, or we called it a virtual lobby, or just a way to have that like communing post show. And another way for folks who really aren't ready right then is to like have something a week later that's just like a Zoom coffee chat or a happy hour, where they can come back and discuss the themes and discuss the work. So that's like kind of how we work on audience from a digital perspective.
That's awesome. So it's, you know, you're, I was, as you were talking about that, I was thinking, oh, it's engagement, but it's kind of really empowerment, really, of your audience. And like, and the engagement piece, I guess, would be what you were just saying. It's like, oh, well, you know, theater lives on in your mind, and here's a space a week later that you can go and like, you know, oh, reconnect with it.
Yeah. And I mean, when we did virtual theater camps, we did a virtual devising camp with teens, where they got to work with Janine Tessori and like to just do all this really cool stuff. We sent them physical care packages so that they had them, you know, so there's lots of ways to bring people together.
Awesome. Craig?
Yeah, I really love the care package idea and just the ways of how do you extend the conversation beyond just being in the room. Because I do think that there's a sense of us as theater artists recognizing what we're putting people through, you know, when they come into the room. So that like I've played Othello twice now, and each time, even I, just as the actor, at the end, once you do the end of that play, you just kind of need somewhere to put that whole experience you've been through. I think that in terms of using technology to bring people in and then bring people out, I think places to have conversation are really important. I think that a lot of times, we come out of the theater, we're like, we had this amazing experience, and you talk to 3 people about it, and it's over. And I wonder if there's a way beyond just like, here's a comment card, tell us how we did, that we create a space either for our website or for our social media or something like that. How do we find ways to digitally continue the conversation so that if you're seeing a show live and in person, maybe there's a QR code you scan and you go to a page where you get to have that conversation and someone moderates it, because we all know how the internet is. But that you can do that so the audience continues to have the conversation. And then also, again, on the other side, providing context to people for what they're about to see. So that, let's say you're gonna go and do a production of Top Dog Underdog, which brings up very difficult issues and ends in a very painful place, right? How do you then use the technology to, if you're an audience member and you buy a ticket, here's some of the issues that are being brought up in this play. Here is the context for what you're gonna see before you walk into the theater, so that the audience knows the kind of space they're going to step into. Because we know too many times we've seen audiences come in, they see the show and they go, oh my God, I didn't know it was going to be like that, or I wouldn't have come if I had known you were going to say this, or all of the, and how do we use it to have those conversations and also make our theater goers more informed? I think that's the space that tech can be used in that way.
Yeah, like having an engaged and informed audience. Love it. Stephanie.
I think, when I first saw this question, because it was in there kind of early, I was thinking about it just like in the immediate, like literally if we are physically or digitally, getting someone right into and right out of the show, and how do we, figure out in a digital space how to sort of guide the folks and start creating that experience, right? That from the moment you walk in, whether it's in a digital space or you are physically arriving in a place, what is it that we use within the technology we have available? And I love, just what especially what Craig and Johanna are saying about, that some of that physically or emotionally getting people into that space, even like to see the show, can happen weeks before, can happen days before, and can be coming out of it. And I also just want to, I was thinking about from the storytelling perspective, a lot of times after the Moth or other shows, tellers, especially newer tellers, come right up to you and they're like, I would love some notes. I would love to hear some notes. And my rule always, the first thing I say to them is, if in 2 or 3 days you would like to hear some thoughts, I'm happy to share thoughts with you in 2 or 3 days. But tonight you get to celebrate that you just did a thing, and that is it. And it's interesting because I know, as Kyle knows, we definitely have tellers in the community who, even when they don't tell, love to give newer tellers notes. And I will hear them on stage telling someone, and then you could have. And I'm like, we're gonna just celebrate this person tonight, but please feel free to reach out to them at a different point, because I think there is also something about, and I don't know how you all feel as both performers and and like in tech and etc. But when you leave that, when you've just done something, when you've just played a role or created something on stage or gotten through that show, that like there also needs to be that moment for the people who have created it. And sometimes I'm like, they have a talk back right after, and I'm like, I want everything about this talk back. I just want it in 2 days. I just don't want it tonight.
Oh, true. Oh my goodness gracious. But I mean, it's something that I'm hearing, I feel like, with our whole conversation tonight, and I'm so sorry that we're actually over, but running out of time. But there has I just keep getting struck with my own perceptions of like what happened when everybody went home, and the way I felt about it, and like, oh, this is definitely what this is, and we have to do it in this way. And then, we at Strawdog actually did a thing where we like, okay, well, we're not performing. Let's look inward for a little bit, and let's like have a conversation with ourselves about, how it is that we do theater, and who it is that we want to be. And a lot of what I'm hearing you all talk about tonight feels like, lots and lots and lots of evolution without actually having lost the thing. And my own personal, like, fear of like, oh, we're trying to turn theater into film, but like, but it's absolutely, it's the reverse almost. It's like we're actually using film to do theater. So like theater still wins, yay. But I mean, I don't know. What are your, in the last, let's say, 5-ish minutes here? I mean, the evolution, I feel like is something that I'm recognizing in all this. What are you guys recognizing in our conversation today, or even some of what I just said, or whatever you want to talk about?
My experience with doing digital and streaming theater has less to do with film and more to do with broadcast television and like a live event and the excitement of that and like the collectivism of that like we were all watching Will Smith slap Chris Rock in live television. And to me, that's what digital and streaming theater has. So it never has resonated with me, the part about it being like film. To me, it's like using tools of streaming, tools that they came up with in the 50s to bring us the nightly news. and like how we're using those tools to reach people in the here and now. It's more like improv but digital. And like Michael, just like what you were saying about video games, literally that's what my son was doing earlier. Like he and his cousin have created these worlds in Roblox Brookhaven where he's obsessed with like horror movies like The Ring, and so he sets up the scenes exactly in there, and then they do like this role play and they act out the whole scene from the movie with their thing. And my son will have 2 old iPhones at the same time so he can play multiple characters in it. It's still just story, but it's using
Yeah,
different tools.
that's amazing. That's amazing.
I think there's lots of evolution. I mean, I think it's really easy to go back to the same space with the same group of folks and do not the same work, but do different work. And you're like, okay, this time we did a different thing and it was really great. And it's a new thing. And yes, but when that frame is removed, which is pretty funny that I say that because we're talking about digital theater, but like we were forced to break out of our particular community, because what happened to me is I became part of a community that was global, and it wasn't, and I remember thinking at one point doing devised work in Bushwick, the same 8 people are watching this, and I want to make sure that I'm really thinking about something and I'm not just making something that I think, my buddy would like. And it's, I think it has brought a lot of thought and a lot of self, thinking about what we're doing, thinking about what this is about. And I think I think that's the big part of what the evolution is about for this particular time in our world.
Would you say, this is purely a question for Michael, but would you say that it's sort of like highlighted your sense of purpose? Like it's like, you have a purpose around what you do, or why you do, and like maybe that's, a different way of executing on that.
I mean, I think I always
Maybe it
had
was always the
purpose,
same.
but I think it just got expanded.
Great. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Craig?
Yeah, sure. The last thing I want to say real quick about it was also remembering that once we went onto these screens, the ability of people to create work without institutions was something that was a huge explosion. Like for me as a playwright, realizing, oh, I can just turn on Zoom, get 5 of my friends, broadcast it out, and all of a sudden I've premiered a new play, right? Remembering that this is now a world where you don't have to wait to get that commission from Steppenwolf or get that, get that check from that big theater company to write your play. You can just write your play, put it online, show it to people, and it can grow from there in whatever ways you want. So I think people who are watching this who maybe are wanting to come up and move through the industry, that's another thing to remember, that you have the tools to make some theater and put it out in the world, and hopefully one day then get hired to make theater more places, and it's right in front of you in your living room, it's in your pocket everywhere you go, and you can just do it. I think that's the big joy of all this.
Yeah, yeah, and no limitations too, right? Like, I mean, you can, like you were just saying, like you can write your play anywhere. Like you could still go see theater. We've already talked about that. I mean, but like, there's this whole expanded world for you, Stephanie.
Yeah, I think just a takeaway for me, and just something that I think about a lot, and especially in our new, much more accessible world for the arts, is just that, if theater is important and necessary, and I think we all agree that it is, it's important and necessary for everyone. It doesn't mean everybody's going to connect with your particular show, but it means that they should have that ability, that, for lack of a better word, that right to be able to connect, to be able to reject it, or to be able to see it. And I just think about the ways that we can, get more to more people, so we're not, as Strawdog said, saying, these 99 seats on Monday. Well, it won't be a Monday. Who are we kidding? These 99 seats on on Friday can see it. But hey, anybody who wants to can watch the video of it Monday. And to make sure that we are thinking broader in how we make things and where we make things. And yeah, for the folks coming up to know that, I mean, Kyle and I think have also talked a bunch about this, but that, theater should not deplete you. It can exhaust you, but making it should not deplete you. But also, like, there are things that are, not, that are going to be hard in the making of it. And for us to kind of fall in love with both of those things being true at the same time, right? We don't want, abusive places, but we also know that unfortunately we can't necessarily walk in the door and also be getting a pension from it. Someday, once the subsidies start, but.
Exactly. I hate it. I just hate it. I have to call it here right now, because we are out of time. This has been a really inspirational conversation to me. So I just really want to thank all of you, our excellent panelists who have been with us tonight. I want to thank Kyle Hammond, who you audience can't see, but he's in the background. But thank you, Kyle, for creating and producing the show. Thank you to OfficeHours.global, Edwin Reyes, and Mondo Machine. Thank you, Five is made possible by Strawdog Theater Company Ensemble members. Strawdog is run on a free theater model where our productions are available to anyone and everyone. We can only do this with generous donations from our community. You can find more information about donating or becoming a Strawdog member and helping to continuously support our work on our website. We will see you, our lovely audience, next week for a conversation with more theater artists. Please submit your questions in the meantime. If you want to join or have a friend, strawdog.org, thank you. You see the strawdog.org, thank you, Five page. And again, thank you all panelists for joining. And I hope you all have a really, really great night.